Welcome to Courageous Conversations with Lionheart Coaching Co., where we talk about the hard parts of our journey and the courage it can sometimes take to find our way back to ourselves. I'm your host, Mandy Woodard, and on this episode, my friend Brandon Belland comes to share his story, along with the struggles and the lessons he's learned along the way. He's a business owner, father, and husband with so much wisdom. We talked about everything from his human design to his divorce to his business. There's so much packed in this episode, so I know you're going to get some serious value out of it. All right, let's get started. Hello. I hope you are well as you start this episode of Courageous Conversations. I felt like I had to come and set it up before you really heard the whole episode because the day Brandon came, we kind of just started talking. I did not do a little welcome. I didn't say introduce yourself, anything of the sort. And as I was preparing this episode to go live, I thought, you know what, I really should probably explain who he is so that you know who you're listening to. So Brandon and I actually were neighbors when I was very little. I'm talking 1.5, and I don't know how old he was at the time, but he was friends with my older siblings back in the day. But as we've gotten older, we have become really good friends, I would like to think anyway. Hopefully he says the same. I will say this though, every time I have a crazy idea or business venture, Brandon is always the first person to say, you got this, you can do this, whatever it is. And when I started the Amanda Hoyle show back in 2017, he was the first person I asked to be a guest. And he was hands down all in right from Jump Street. And it always meant so much. So when I started the podcast, I knew I had to have him on. Not just because he's so supportive. I mean, that's a great reason, but because he has so much wisdom. He really does. So of course, I'm so grateful that he came and sat with me and shared so much of it and was so open. I can't wait for you to hear this, really. It's through our openness and sharing our story that we help other people along their path. And that's what I really wanted with this show. So I'm honored that he came and sat here and shared all of this. And of course, as we talked, he's the coffee guy. So I had a French press and some coffee, and you'll get to hear me pouring that throughout the episode. And we talked about so many different things. And I think that's enough. I think that's all I need to say to set this one up. So, okay. Let's roll right into it. Here you go. My courageous conversation with Brandon Belland. Do you know this was what kept me from doing a podcast? Was buying a mic.
Oh, no, I think that's what you're pointing to.
It is what I'm pointing to. You're right. But ultimately I was like, I don't know what the hell to get. And I just didn't get it. And then I had an expert, quote unquote. I did. I had somebody who really knows computers send me what to get. And I still didn't get it for another 3 months.
Yeah.
Because I've started and stopped so many things that I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend money.
No, you and I are multi-potentialites. Have you heard that term?
No, but I like it.
Oh, man, there's a great little TED Talk. And it was the first time I'd been made privy to that term. And it is the lady on stage goes on to describe exactly the way that we operate, and that we will fully immerse ourselves into a project knowing that it may last a week or a month or 6 months. I mean, once you get old enough and you understand how you operate, you know it's fleeting, you know, and it's really just how long is the fuse on this.
Right.
You know.
And people judge themselves in that a lot. Like, they judge themselves. Well, I did it myself.
Well, your friends judge you, too. They're like, how long are you going with this one? Like, I don't know.
And Richie.
that's the adventure of it all.
My poor husband. Because he is not this way.
That's okay. But he knows you.
But he knows me. But it's like, I get $1 million ideas every day.
Every day. The deal of the decade comes along about once a day.
Yeah. I'm like, this will be it. Oh, sometimes I make a joke. I'm like, one of these days it's going to be a lottery ticket idea, Richie. You just wait.
A friend of mine the other day, I was asking him, I was like, so what's the deal with, like, somebody comes up with an idea or, especially with dieting and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I'll tell you what it is. He's like, they look in the mirror and they go, this is going to be my ticket. And I've never forgot that. It was the funniest notion to be like, wow, I think they really do. I think they really do that. That's pretty great.
Well, I'm trying over here, and I like this, what I'm doing now, because it feels more effortless. Mm-hmm. And it's more aligned with what I've wanted to do. It's like what I've avoided doing for whatever reason. Actually, I know the reasons, but how long do we have is the question.
I don't feel like I suffer from, like, what people, like a heightened sense of anxiety, I guess, just something that's real, that really takes over, and you have this visceral kind of like sweating and all this, right? But usually there's a little bit of like, your heart rate will come up a little bit, you'll maybe just feel a little antsy, or you got to fidget with something, or, you know, and I did not feel that at all driving here to do this.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Not at all. Like, I'm so ready to, not because I think I have a great, this is no, like, I mean, me trying to know exactly what I'm going to say and have it all, what we're going to talk about. I have no idea, but I just know that sitting down and talking is not, especially in the setting, it's a great setting, by the way.
Thank you.
There was no, I mean.
Well, you're good at it.
I think my heart rate went up more from the music I was listening to on the way over here than to worrying about talking.
But you're great at it. And I actually was going to tell you, I was watching a few months ago. It's been like 2 months, so not super fresh. The outtakes from when we did the cooking show together. And you're so patient. You are so patient. I was cringing at myself. Like, we don't start things because we know we're going to be horrible at them a lot of times. And when I look back at that, I was like, yeah, you were pretty horrible, Mandy. Like, I don't mean to be mean to myself, but it took me an hour just to say, this is the Amanda Hoyle Show. And you just stood there and was like, we're great. I got all day. I said it 150,000 times over and over and over again. It was terrible. But not terrible, because it was a great experience. But
I know that you have the ability to rebound, much like myself, because no one's going to judge you harder than you,
right?
And you know that about yourself. Like, in having conversations with people, I've found out that there a lot of the adversity they face is the worry of judgment of others, and it's but it's not something that I personally, at least at this point in my life, don't feel like I really have. Like, I'm going to look in the mirror and be way harder on myself than anybody could stand in front of me and be hard on me about anything I do. You know the inner workings of the way you operate. So you have every little ability to judge the nooks and crannies and get bogged down in the minutia about, what you expect of yourself.
So I have 2 questions for that. 1, how old are you?
43.
Did that come with age? Or did it come with age? I have another question, but I'll let you answer one first.
In regard to the self-judgment?
Yeah, to were you always that way, or did it just end up?
I've always been really introspective. My dad said that he thought I was, I don't know if they were like really diagnosing autism back then, but he thought I was like maybe on the spectrum to some degree when I was younger, because I didn't talk a whole lot. Yeah. It's just really pensive. And I remember that, like, I would just watch kind of what went on and just kind of mull it over. So I don't know, that introspective kind of way about me, I think it helps you iron out these things. Yeah. You think about all that stuff, and you don't stand in the mirror and tell yourself you're an idiot, and you look, whatever, watch your own videos and say, go back and watch your videos and critique yourself. But it's similar that way. That's your version of going over it in your head.
No, that is true though. And I do that. I will watch my videos. And I had somebody in here who was like, talking about wanting to start doing things, but they can't watch themselves. And I said, you have to. You have to if you're going to improve, because you are going to see where you repeat the same words, or like I watched my videos and noticed I wouldn't stop touching my hair. And that's very distracting. Yeah. So you have to reflect on yourself in order to grow. We have to have that self-reflection. I wanted to ask you too, though, if you, and I'm really putting you on the spot here.
It's okay.
Don't tell me no. No, you can tell me no. It's fine. Do you know what time you were born?
In the morning. Around 8 o'clock. 7:50 something, I think.
Are you interested in human design? Do you know what human design is? Did you listen to my show?
Yes. I've listened to all of them. Stop.
I'm just messing with you. I was curious what your design is, though, because so much of what you're saying reflects in your chart.
Yeah, so I have no idea. I don't even know what my chart is other than something that you go log into before you have a doctor's appointment. So,
do you mind if I pull your chart?
Okay. No, I love this. This reminds me of much of what Justin was talking about with Mr. Thielen. You remember? Like, he reminded me of that guy. That guy
did you know him, Mr. Thielen?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
How do you say your name?
Brandon Belland. It's not Belland.
I always say it wrong then.
I know you do. It's okay.
Why have you never corrected me?
I'm just not that kind of person. In the amount of time we've known each other, it is completely inexcusable. You've had to have heard my last name by now enough times.
Say it again. I don't even remember what you just said. How do you say it?
This is how I know I'm not a boss, because you don't know my last name.
No. Say it again.
So 99.9% of the world would pronounce that Belland.
That's how I say it, yes.
And you should. But for whatever reason, everybody in my family pronounced it Belland. So.
Okay, so I met somebody who is a mutual friend of yours over the summer. And she said Belland. And I said, what?
Ooh, that's way off. Yeah.
I was like, I have known him literally my entire life.
That just goes against everything in grammar. I mean, there's only one
but also, how rude of me, though, to be like, I know, because I've known him my entire life. And here, I don't say it correctly.
Well, I think to your credit, my entire family doesn't say it right. I don't know why they just chose to pronounce it that way. But anyway.
I already forgot again how you pronounce it properly. Like, you're going to have...
It's just Belland.
Is it not...
It's spelled that way, too.
It's Belland.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying Belland.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So it needs to be Belland.
Yeah.
Brandon Belland.
You're putting the accent on the E instead of on the A. And it doesn't matter. Let's go. Moving along.
Oh, I bet this is really picking up a good pour. A little ASMR here.
Yeah, you know that, like, what is it, comedians in cars getting coffee?
I love that show.
Right? Yeah. Of course they've got the burnt Lavazza coffee, but anyway, it's like...
I know.
The pouring, they always get the mics, like, really nice and close to all that.
Okay, so I am going to tell you your design.
Okay,
let me tell you why I love this. When you know these things, you then know how to communicate with people, because there's 4 different types, and then there's one subtype in human design. But you can see there's all these gates, and then there's channels, and then there's centers.
Okay.
And when you know a person's type and what they need, because a lot of times people don't know what they need. I feel like you are very self-reflective. I might not tell you anything you don't already know. But a lot of people are like, just tell me what I need to know. And that's this.
Okay.
It's a cheat sheet. But this is your aura. This is a blueprint of your aura. So if you think of like your finger DNA, this is the same thing, only
tailored to me.
Yes. Okay. And it sounds crazy, but anyway, we won't go into that story. So you're a manifesting generator. You are meant to do a lot of different things. You're meant to start and stop a lot of different things. And you need rest. You need breaks in between those things. So you start your day with a full tank of gas. You have to expend all your energy before you hit your head on the pillow, or you're not going to be able to sleep. And you do need to be able to take breaks in between the things throughout the day. Like if you're like, I'm burnt out, I need to stop. Like you need to listen to that. The other thing to that is you have this 34 to 20 here, and that's a lot of bounce around energy. A lot of people think they have ADD or ADHD, and not to say somebody doesn't. Let me be careful with my words here. Mm-hmm. But this is just who you are, though. It's to be like, bam, 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 like a ping pong ball. But it has to be, if you're going to do something, it has to be a hell yes.
If it's not a hell yes, then forget about it. You're going to be dragging your feet. You're going to be frustrated, pissed off. Like, I don't want to do this. If something's a yes, though, you're all in. You have a fully defined head, ajna, throat. This is your identity center, and this is your sacral, and this is your spleen. You have an open heart, open emotional, and open root. So up here, you probably just know things. This is that defined ajna. What you were kind of talking about is like, you know things about things. You don't really know how you know it. You just know it. It's like, I always say I know a general amount of information about a general amount of things. That's basically that. And you have this 43. I believe that's the gate of insight. Yes, I was correct. But you always know where you're going because you have this direction and you have it connected to your throat so you can speak it. You also have these really, the middle here is creative channels. So you have inner child and it connects with your throat. So it's really important for you to create things. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be painting on a canvas. It can be literally anything. You have the energy though. You have that defined sacral. And you have extremely good intuition. Do you believe that?
Yeah.
A lot of people cloud out their intuition and they don't listen, but you have such good intuition. You even have this gate of intuitive clarity here, which is the highest level of intuition somebody could have in their chart. Plus you have a defined ajna. So basically, if we're in a life or death situation, we want you in the room because you're going to be able to intuitively know what to do. And then you're open emotional. So you probably are pretty laid back, pretty even keeled. But if you get around somebody that's super emotional, you might amplify them.
Yeah.
And then the root, the not self theme with the root is feeling like you need to be in a hurry to get things done. Like, hurry up and get this off my plate. Mm-hmm. Richie has an open root, and that's like Saturday morning. He's like, we got to clean. We got to get all this done so it can be done for the day. And I'm like, I have a defined root. I don't feel that pressure. So I'm like, it's fine. Like, let's just sit on the couch and have our coffee. You're a storyteller. I believe that.
I love that.
And a comedian. This is also the comedian gate. So 100% accurate. I will tell you though, that gate, and then I won't dive in too much more, but you'll have to tell me if any of that resonated. Oh, I wanted to tell you
only
how you
100% of it.
Only 100% of it. Okay, I want to tell you how you make decisions too, but I want to tell you about this storyteller gate. I've been diving into this because Scarlett has it and I have some clients that have it. And when you're a child who is not allowed to tell their stories, or you're interrogated or investigated when you're telling a story, because exaggeration is going to be part of your story. You want to be able to get a reaction out of somebody of emotion, whether that's a laugh or maybe you're trying to anger somebody, you might try to piss them off, so you throw a little bit more in there. But if you're interrogated in your story, you become frustrated. Or if you're not allowed to have that outlet, then it leads to being sullen. And adults tend to find themselves depressed and they don't know why they're depressed. And when I look at a chart and see that, I'm like, well, were you able to tell your stories? Did anybody encourage you or listen to your stories? Or were you always questioned and interrogated and silenced? And that always, the answer is almost always, yeah, I was. Okay, well, you got to start telling your stories again. Mm-hmm. Get that creativity flowing and going, because that's what's going to help pull you out. I don't remember the second part of what I was going to tell you, but storytelling, very important for you.
I used to play scenarios out in my head when I would get reprimanded as a kid for doing stuff, or disciplined, whatever you want to call it, butt whipped, whatever. I mean, all of it.
Yeah.
I would go in my room and I would replay it over and over. I've told my friend this so many times. Like, I split a lot of wood in high school, but I got a lot of that frustration and anger of why I didn't click with my stepdad. Like, we just are different planes. I love him so much. Yeah. But a lot of that love was discovered later on. It was a lot of, know, being at odds with him. Yeah. I was a very soft kid. Like, I just like being not coddled. I definitely wasn't coddled, but I was, it was easier to approach me with love and conversation and understanding, but he was a man of few words. Mm-hmm. And I was disciplined very simply. It was like, get yelled at, and if that doesn't work, the belt's coming out. You know, and that's kind of like, and I had a hard time with that. So when I got to the age where I played football for a number of years, like my summer wood cutting and winter, like hauling wood all winter long and all that was like part of my physical just building, and also an emotional release as much as it was a physical,
Yeah.
a breakdown and build up. I killed my stepdad 1,000 times in my head with that axe while I was swinging it onto the logs because he had me so mad that he couldn't speak. We couldn't have a conversation because any conversation I wanted to open up with him was me refuting his way of disciplining me.
Right.
I was like, I'm not here to listen to you. You listen to what I say and we go forward from here. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. This is not a debate. We're not having a conversation. You did something wrong. I corrected you this way. Now go on and do what I told you.
Right. And you can't receive that, especially looking at your chart. You have a defined head, defined ajna, defined throat. Tristan is this, and I always say that setup right there. You can't tell you nothing. Are you kidding? Yeah. I'm not telling you anything. Oh, and let me see one more thing for you. No, you don't have this. Okay, because there is a gate that deeply resents being told what to do, and I have that. And I had a very similar upbringing with my stepdad. And we have a phenomenal relationship now. I love him so much. He's not even married to my mom anymore, but he's still my stepdad. And we are so close. But same thing. I'm going to tell you, and that's it. And it did not go well.
Yeah. No, I was just left, kind of with my mouth hanging open. Like, there's so much to say and talk about at 9 years old,
Right.
And I was like,
yeah,
even if I didn't have the words then, I had the emotions, and I knew
Right.
that like more should be done about this to try and figure out what I did wrong or what, Anyway, it was a great high level of adversity at that age that I think really helped my parenting style.
That's what I was going to ask, is how did that go into now you being a dad?
Oh, it's the biggest blessing in disguise because I was able to weather it. Now, if you're not able to weather it, that's a whole nother thing. And you start really hiding knives around the house or whatever people do.
Or truthfully, we then repeat the cycle. So a lot of dads continue to just repeat the cycle. And I always like to add to I want to say no fault of your own, but we all need to take responsibility at some point. But honestly, when you're just doing what you're taught. But anyways.
No, I tell people I was perfectly parented, and I don't mean that, look at me and you'll see an example of what you should see in the world. That's not what I mean. I mean, my mom was the balance to that very hard way of discipline in that my mom always taught me empathy.
Okay.
My mom taught me to hold doors for people. She taught me that when someone's struggling, it's okay to get emotionally involved in their issue to help bring them up out of it. And so I had this physical discipline, and then I had this emotional connection, so I got the best of both sides of it.
Yeah.
And mom was the intervention too if she thought my stepdad was being too overbearing. If there were times where he was really frustrated because of work or something, then she would kind of she was never fearful in the household. He disciplined the way he did, but she also had no problem stepping in and
that's great.
Just being able to run interference a little bit just for the sake of kind of letting things fizzle out a little bit.
So now how do you parent your kids? Do your kids have axe killings in their head?
No,
That's the question.
they don't. No. Avonlea did pick up a pitchfork the other day to defend herself against her brother who's being a little overbearing. I said, Avonlea, a pitchfork? She's like, I wasn't going to use it.
Well, Scarlett had her Barbie horse yesterday and comes downstairs. I was at the store and that's what she says. I had that thing ready to go, Mommy. Oh, yeah. Like she was ready to get Tristan if she needed to. Like, where does this come from?
No, I learn so much from my kids all the time. They've extended me grace on numerous occasions and to each other. There's been an instance where they've all showed each other grace because sibling rivalries are real and it's very interesting in the moments that stick out in my mind. There's a few of them. There was a time when my oldest Dominic, I guess you want to say, assaulted Everett. Everett would call it an assault. He's so easily hurt. He's pretty tender. And he was crying. He was upset. And I handed him a wooden spoon. And I said, well, go hit him. I was like, Dominic, he's going to hit you because you deserve it. I just told him it was coming. It's like, here, go hit your brother. And Everett turns around and faces Dominic. And he turned back around to me. And he just threw the spoon down. And he's like, I'm not going to hit him. And I was like, man, I love that.
So beautiful.
And if he would have hit him, I'd have loved that too. There was
We've had this similar scenario in our house. My husband's been like, all right, Tristan, I got to hold your arms back. Liam gets a free punch to the gut. And Liam's like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes he does, though. Let me be real clear on the record.
Well, they'll get it, but it won't be while we're all sitting there monitoring. It'll happen like that random, chop to the ribs as you're walking by, going out of the room or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Mm-hmm. And so to the next example, Everett was being a little, the way he tends to like to lead the group when Dominic's not around. And so Avonlea, just being the sweet girl she's looking at a flower outside. She's just got a flower in her hand. And he walks up and brushes her nose with his hand. Like something I would have in school if I saw that happen. You know what I mean? Like I've always been a protector. You know?
Yeah.
So I had friends who were picked on a lot, and I was constantly running security interference.
Yeah.
Much because I probably saw my mom do that, and she was the empathetic, protector type. So she gets really upset. Of course, she wasn't doing anything, and she just gets, bullied, for lack of a better term, and comes into the house and explains what's going on. I go outside and talk to Everett. I was like, Everett, you're not a fighter. You really shouldn't pretend like you're one, because someone at school is going to humble you real quick. Like, don't walk around pretending you're bad, because you ain't.
You're a lover, not a fighter.
Yeah, you are, buddy, and don't pretend, because you're going to get yourself in a bad spot. And I just straight up told him, I was like, the way that you're acting, I was like, this is strike two, because he's already had one incident before this with like getting physical with Avonlea. Yeah. I was like, this is your sister. I was like, the third time this happened, and pants are hitting the floor and I'm whipping that ass. I was like, I don't care. I'm in front of God and everybody. I don't care who's looking. I went back in the house. Avonlea comes in 5 minutes later. She's like, Dad? I said, yeah. She comes over and she grabs my hands. She said, please don't do that to him. I was like, I looked at her and I said, okay, I won't. Because, when I really should have said, well, that's up to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
he
real
gets
answer.
to make that decision.
But I wanted to validate her, her extension of grace.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's funny, the scenario of oldest, middle, youngest. And we both have two boys and then a girl.
And the youngest girl, we do. I think about that a lot.
That same scenario has happened plenty of times where Scarlett is like, we honestly do not whip butts. We stop. It doesn't, we try, so that's how I was raised. So, of course, that's what I began doing with my oldest when he was little. I quickly realized that was not at all helping a situation. It was only making it worse. Yep. It never helped, ever. That's
the exact same way it happened with us. I was physical with Dominic a few times, didn't work out. He's a tender person too. And I was like, this is not, and I'm way capable of a better, remedy than going the physical route, because I grew up with that physical route. I know all the stuff that goes unanswered and questioned that comes after that. Right. So very quickly changed that. So, but I do keep it in my bag of tricks.
I do too. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be like, boy, I'm gonna go get Dad's belt. No, I don't actually.
There are people that say it that aren't capable of it.
Right.
I'm very capable of it, and I really try to work my way through all of the options before I get to that.
Okay.
Up my sleeve.
Okay. Let me introduce you to something called nonviolent communication.
Stop.
No, seriously, that changed my parenting.
Cool.
2018 or 19 is when I discovered that book. My life coach told me about it. And honestly, I will jump to the, I'm going to do something that I don't want to do if you don't listen to me. And then I have to tell myself, is this what I would tell my clients? No, it's not. So,
just to be clear, she's pointing to a book on her shelf, not nonviolent communication in general. I'm very aware.
I have to tell you something else too, because in that story, I didn't get to this part of your design, but your profile line, so the role you're here to play, is heretic / martyr. So you're a 5'3" or 3'5", and that fifth line is the hero of the story, the one that's going to swoop in and save the day. I have to wonder if your mom maybe has that too, if she did that a lot. I have this. I very much was the protector. And even now, my kids, they'll get a little bit embarrassed. At least my middle son does. My oldest doesn't care. But when we're at football games And I mean, there is a sea of kids on this hill, and I will walk right up there and jump in if I see somebody. Like, these boys were picking on it's like a group of boys picking on a group of girls.
Peacocking.
And I could see that these girls were really getting upset. And I'd walked by once, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to let that roll. Let me not get in the middle of it. And I'll go to the bathroom with my daughter, and then we're coming back, and I can see the girls were getting really upset. And I said, Scarlett, you sit right here and do not move. They were teenagers. They're not young kids. And I walked up and I went straight to the girl and I was like, do you want what's happening to be happening? Because I've had to learn you cannot rescue people that do not want to be rescued. So I said, do you want this to be happening? And she was like, no, I don't. And I turned around and I didn't even have to say a word. The boy like handed her water bottle back that he was messing with her with. And then these boys tried to play it off like we weren't doing anything, and I was like, look, dude, you ain't gonna fool me. I was sitting there watching, and now it's fine.
You're weak because you're backpedaling,
right? And you're like, these kids really need some guidance, though. I mean, it's crazy, and I don't know, I'm gonna come up with something for that age range, because it's hard to watch and not do something. And that's that hero in me that wants to like come in and be the hero of the story. But so that's you. It's like, you're the problem solver. You are here to save the day. But the downside to being a fifth line sometimes, not always, is you have tell me your life story written on your forehead. Like, everybody wants to come to you with their problems and save me. Me and my husband are both fifth lines, and we constantly are trying to save each other when we don't want to be saved. It is like one of the biggest sources of our arguments.
Struggle. I got something to learn.
Like, I got a message from some rando one day that was trying to get in touch with one of our mutual friends. And I was telling him about it long after it had happened. And I'd already handled the situation. He was like, don't you reply to that. And I was like, whoa, bro. I can take care of myself. Thank you. We literally got into an argument about it. So funny. So anyways, that fifth line, you're going to solve the problems.
I love being a problem solver. I love when people come to me for insight on how to fix something, because honestly, if I don't know, I don't even pretend to know. There's no, I'm like, I am not the person that's going to give you the answer to this. I have no problem in telling people that.
I have to laugh because it's so in your design, because I don't mean to keep bringing it back to this, but somebody who doesn't have a defined ajna will pretend to be certain. Yeah. They will pretend to know. That is literally the not self trait. So you are defined. I am too. I will 100% tell you, like, I actually don't have the answer to that right now, but I'll figure it out.
I feel like sometimes someone could, if we're having a conversation, they could feel like they're reading a book, because there's a disclaimer. It's like, this is the end of my knowledge on this topic. I get to a very defined point, and I'm like, this is as far as it goes for me.
That's great, though. Let's talk a little bit about your business for a second, because I like talking about your journey, and that's what I told you we were going to talk about, is everything, basically. I'm wondering if you want to share anything about starting your business and the problems that maybe that have arose with that.
There's all the problems. Like, everything's a problem when you start, because you haven't dealt with it yet. Yeah. And if you have dealt with it, you haven't dealt with it from an ownership perspective. Mm-hmm. So you can work for someone else doing the exact same work, and the second you start working for yourself, a whole new group of problems present themselves. Yeah. Could be that you did all the physical work, but none of the bookkeeping.
That's usually my problem.
You know what I mean? That's the reason I bring that up is a lot of people, who do inquire about business related things. The first thing I say is, please do yourself a favor and get a bookkeeper if it's not your forte, because
that's the worst.
You've been a practitioner this long. You know how to do the physical work. The bookkeeping is what you did not do. That's the stuff. That's one of the biggest things you don't see. Yeah. Going on behind the curtain.
Yeah, for sure.
Is all of the numbers, and the numbers, the cash flow. Cash flow patterns are what make or break businesses. Yeah. Hands down. That's that you can look to a business's cash flow, and you can actually kind of forecast whether or not the business is going to make it or not, unless something intercedes and corrects that. Financial knowledge and a little bit of planning. You can't really plan, like
Right.
you can't say, I know my sales this month are going to be this. Like, you just don't know that.
Yeah.
from the line you came
I've
from before
I've
this.
tried
you
that.
know that. It's
It
up and down.
doesn't.
It's all
And
over the
even in
place.
this, I just.
And I don't even think people give geography enough credit for that. We live in a Four Seasons area that drives foot traffic. So if you have a brick and mortar, if you have a product that's seasonal,
Yeah. So how long have you been open now? And
6 years.
And do you have Cordial Coffee in Berryville? Mm-hmm. And then
that's it.
And that's it.
It's technically two businesses because there's a wholesale business
Okay.
that supplies other cafes, restaurants, bed and breakfasts
That's awesome.
with whole bean coffee and kegged cold brew that can be served on
That's
draft.
awesome.
Retail bags, things like that. And then there's the cafe, which is its own separate entity.
Yeah.
It's very important. Another thing, back to the bookkeeping, started as one, and it's very hard to dig through transactions and separate what's wholesale, what's retail,
Yeah.
and have to do that at the end of the year when you should have set it up that way to begin with.
Yeah.
So that was a lesson learned on the way.
And what year did you open Cordial? I don't remember.
2016.
Okay. I was thinking about
We just passed the 6-year mark.
Okay. Hey, that's great. You have to get that first 5 years is the hardest, right?
Yeah.
So do you feel like you learned a lot of lessons in those first 5 years. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But did you have other locations?
Opened other locations, opened a restaurant in tandem. I'm one of those people, if I get my mindset to something, I just have to do it full on, like you were explaining earlier. Like when you're in, you're all in. I wanted to know what a full-blown restaurant experience was like. Not that we aren't inspected that way, because we do serve food at the cafe.
Yeah.
But I wanted a front of house, back of house, that type of,
Yeah.
the opportunity presented itself to buy a restaurant who was a wholesale customer of mine. I bought it, ran it as best I could for 2 years, and I think that the menu / location / and again, back to cash flow. Cash flow is the biggest thing. The cash flow wasn't right in order to have it maintained, so I just walked away from it, liquidated everything, and just.
How did it feel to make that decision?
Fine, I felt great about it.
I
I felt great about it to do it, and I felt great about it to close it because it was what needed to happen.
Yeah.
It was look, a friend of mine said to me, one of my best business mentors, my buddy Jay, said, you can't be friends with your books.
Yeah.
And people love trying to be friendly with their books
Yeah.
instead of having their books tell them the absolute truth about what's going on in your business.
That is actually incredible advice. You can't
I
try
have
to
it in my phone.
You
in a
can try to
note
like
by
pretend
itself.
like it's good. Yeah, so you can see it all the time.
I have that one quote in a note by itself in my phone because I'll just randomly come across it and just it's a reminder. And I know it now. In principle, I would never be friends with my books. I always want them to be totally honest with me about the way that my business is breathing.
Yeah.
And cash flow is the life of a business, hands down. So.
Honestly, it's the life of a household too.
Yeah, very much so.
You very much have to look at that.
I mean, if you think, your house is run like a business. It's got bills and operating and moving parts. It's like,
right.
obligations.
Yeah. It's great advice for anybody. So you closed that, and then the other location, the other Cordial Coffee.
We had a shop in Marshall that the 2-year lease was up at the very beginning of COVID, so April 2020, sorry. The lease was up. We wanted to go month to month. The landlords didn't want to do that, so we decided to not continue that location, but the person who ended up taking it over buys their coffee through me, so it's a wholesale account now. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so it stayed a coffee shop, serving our coffee exclusively, but it's not technically a Cordial location.
So you were able to take that weight though off of your plate.
Yeah, it was just it was a risk I didn't want to take. And how many times can you say you've been through a pandemic in your life? I mean,
I know, that's what I was about to say. What perfect timing for you to have your lease end then.
yeah, and so it was like, how did I feel about closing that location? Felt great because the numbers told me
It was time.
that was what I had to do.
Yeah. So you simplified then. You went back to the basics.
Yeah, and it's been great. It's been, and not because it was too overwhelming, but again, your cash flow will dictate your operations if you let it tell you the truth about the way things are going. And then going back to one location, focusing efforts on the dual aspect of that, wholesale and retail, able to make that work.
Yeah.
So 3 locations does not mean tripling your income.
That's
Let's
a good
be
point,
very
though.
clear. Like, I mean, a lot of people like to look at it like logarithmically, or like some like, oh, okay, well, we make this much at once, so if we open 2, it'll be twice that, and 3 will be 3 times that, and that is completely not the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes you open 3 locations and you make 10 times your own income.
Yeah.
So, but it's not linear like that.
Nothing is. And so my next question is, do you have to be at Cordial all the time? Or do you feel like you've got a good team in place? Like, do you have people helping you run it and manage it so that you can, step back?
Yep. Caitlin runs the retail side of it.
Okay.
And I run the wholesale side of it.
And Caitlin is?
Caitlin, my ex-wife, is my business partner.
Who you started it with.
Correct.
Okay.
She runs the retail side. I run the wholesale side.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it is. You'd have to tell me if it is. Does that work well?
It does work well.
Yeah.
You can get a lot accomplished if you act like adults.
This is true.
So, not many businesses survive a divorce. I mean, especially when you work very closely, it's a small business. So,
yeah,
we're able to just be able to. I mean, honestly, the business having that dual aspect, and me coming from a roasting background, like having already roasted for, I guess I'm coming up on my 10th year of being a coffee roaster. So, but being a barista even further back than that. So, the roasting side fit the way I wanted to do business. The retail side fit the way she wanted to continue to do business. And so we have our own lanes. And they are connected because obviously the wholesale stuff that I sell goes into the cafe, exclusively. We share the same business name, but it's technically a separate entity that I do business from. So,
was it hard to get to that point, or did you guys just figure it out right away?
It wasn't hard from a business operation standpoint. It was hard from an emotional,
right,
tumultuous kind of post-divorce emotions flying around. How do we do this and make it work? We've got 2 separate households to support now, and kids and all this. So,
yeah,
but it was getting the details of that kind of stuff worked out. Was there's always just a level of I don't know. It depends. It's kind of hard to describe because it really depends on the person going through it.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
But in my experience, post-divorce, you have this emotional time where you're trying to really kind of create your new sense of normal, or what kind of is going to work for you. And then to have a business tied to that. The interesting aspect about that is that we knew the business could operate. It had been for 4 years, I guess, at that point, 3 years. And that we had the potential to really set both of ourselves up to continue to do it successfully. Mm-hmm. So having that accountability to each other through the business kind of really helped accountability in general across the board.
Right.
So everything that, because our goal was aligned to have a business be successful and make sure our kids' experience is as good as possible.
Yeah.
To make sure they're taken care of. So.
Well, that's one of the hardest things, though. I can imagine anyway, when you separate and then trying to allow your kids to have a good experience. Mm-hmm. That's tough. My parents stayed friends. So I never knew my parents together. I was a baby when they got divorced. And they were really good friends. Mm-hmm. I mean, my dad stayed the night one night to take me on my zoo field trip in kindergarten. My mom was making us pancakes. And him and my stepdad would take my brother to the races all the time. That was their thing they did together. And it was just I couldn't imagine it not being that way. It made it feel easy for me as a kid at that age to feel like this is okay.
Yeah, and you want to talk about the icing on the cake as far as being able to weather the judgment of others is to go through that, knowing that you've created all these relationships with customers who interact with you, and then your now ex-spouse all the time, and all of the little that goes on in the background,
oh man,
gossip and somebody's opinion and somebody's complete. So there was a point when I went to a coffee shop in Winchester. down on the Walking Mall. And I went in there. This is like, I guess, I don't know, 6 months post-divorce or something like that. And I walked in there, and I was just making small talk with the barista or whatever, and asked her, I was like, have you ever been to Cordial in Berryville? And she's like, yeah, but that place is like closing. So I was like, wow, that just got churned out and spit out and chewed up and beat down. And I mean, it was like, it's pretty wild to think that.
What did you say?
I don't know. I don't really remember.
Did you tell her that you owned it?
I told her it wasn't closing. I knew that for sure. I was like, oh no, they're not closing. You know what I mean? Like, we're not closing. Whatever I said, it was like, I made her know that is not what's happening.
Yeah, please correct that rumor.
Yeah,
it's not true.
So it's one of those.
I actually think somebody might have said that to me, that it was closing, and I was like, no way.
I have no doubt. I mean, the assumption that when people are together, they own a business together, and then they're not together anymore. It is an easy assumption that the business is going to go down with it. I mean, yeah. So
there's no way that you weren't going to have Cordial, though. No. In my mind,
like, it was the ultimate test. To
be
honest, it was really probably the one of the highest levels of adversity that I've ever faced in my life, just because of the potential judgment, or the judgment is going on, because obviously you're going to another coffee shop and they tell you that like, your business is closing
2 towns away, and they're like, yeah. That's so funny.
So, I like the name of this show, by the way, because like I came in here and I was like, we're just going to talk. We're going to put some heat on it. Like, we'll just talk about it. Man, what do you want to know? You know what I mean? Like, let's just talk about it. This is nothing that I've kept in secret either. Like, but people don't come to you and ask, believe me. They would much rather just talk about what they think they know with their friends than to come talk to you about what's going on.
Well, I've never even asked you about that process.
Yeah.
Partly because I'm like, it's not my business.
No, right. But most people don't care if it's something.
But I'm not going to spread a rumor along with it. You're right. People don't care if it's not their business. They'll ask anyway.
I have a theory that 99% of the world's problems are because people cannot mind their own business.
I would say that you're probably very close to true. That's close to accurate.
Put that filter over every problem that you read about and be like, that person didn't mind their own business. Social media is predicated on not minding your own business. True. It is the factor with social media. Yeah. You are reaching out to see what someone else is doing. Yeah. Not that they're not telling you, because they're putting it out there.
Right.
But your job is to not mind your own business when you get on social media.
And honestly, I'm going to be very truthful. I forget that when I'm on there sometimes, because I'll post things and then I'll run into somebody I haven't seen in 10 years and they'll say something to me. I'm like, how did you know about that? And then I was like, oh.
Because I run my mouth.
Right. Because I say everything. But actually, I've pulled way back. I have pulled way back on what I say on social media, especially having older kids now. I want to protect their privacy.
Sure.
And there are things that I know that I'm teaching them. You put it out there, you can't bring it back in. People screenshot things. Like, it stays on the record no matter what you do. I don't want to do that to them, though. I don't want to tell their story. And a lot of what I ever want to say is their story. And like through parenting. Mm-hmm. Why do I feel safer talking about it on the podcast, though? Because it's almost as if they're not going to see it. They might hear it one day.
Coming off of the end of that part of the conversation about like the amount of adversity that goes along with that. Like, you work so hard to build this asset, and now because of this other factor, it's in danger. But, it's what you know and love. It's what you spent time, being a practitioner in. You've spent all your blood, sweat, and tears trying to scratch and claw in the world of business, and just get some wind under your wings. And that was a monumental amount of adversity all at one time. And it was like, coming out of that was, I swear, I was just talking to my wife Christy about this the other day. You could drain my bank accounts, burn my business to the ground, and the next day it's going back up. There's just I have learned I'm infatuated and love adversity.
Yeah.
Like, I have learned that in a second, because it's a lesson that's just disguised in struggle. or it's like wrapped in initial struggle. But like if you take a piece of paper and you draw a circle and you write struggle and you flip it over and you write lesson on that side, the size of the lesson is directly correlated to the size of the struggle.
That's good, Brandon. Can we quote you on that? That's
Sure.
really good. And that's what I was going to say is like, what came from that though? Like it was so hard, but what came from that?
I mean, the marriage that I'm in now, like having a relationship that by diving into myself and figuring out, the things that you just kind of mentioned in that graph or whatever, like understanding love languages, that like the 5 love languages or whatever are kind of like, seems like the 101 course to getting into that line of, understanding yourself to better represent yourself to your potential spouse or, relationship or whatever.
Yeah.
Understanding that synergy is important. So like the 1, the 1 + 1 = 3 type of mentality where if you're with the right person in any relationship, business, spouse, or, otherwise, like the both of you coming together should be able to manifest and really present a part of who you are that you're not capable of expressing on your own. So with the addition of that person, you're now able to project out into the world a part of you that is allowed to flourish because of their involvement in your life, which by yourself you couldn't do.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that.
I feel that way too, though. And I've been with Richie for almost 20 years, and I will say that there's been times, though, where I don't flourish. I go the opposite. And it's usually because there's something unhealed within me that's being triggered by him. But as soon as I face whatever that is, and then I talk through it with him, it goes totally up the other direction. And it truly, if it wasn't for him being the way he is, I would not be here doing what I'm doing, because he could have told me a long time ago, you need to go get a 9-to-5, like quit with all this $1 million ideas.
I don't know where that stuff comes from. Like I didn't come from a family of people who were entrepreneurial by any stretch of the imagination. Both of my parents are W-2 employees, like their whole life.
Do you think it's a generational thing? Because I feel like
my granddad was an artist and worked for himself. He was self-employed, but we never really got into. We had great conversations. He lived the longest out of all my grandparents, so it was nice to have that. But we never really got into the like real details of how he decided to work for himself and like real business conversations. I was kind of early on, But
I just wonder though if it was like our generation seeing what's possible, that you don't actually have to work for someone else. You could do something else if you wanted to.
I just knew that the reasons that my mom said she kept her job or my dad kept their job were not reasons that felt like they were going to be fulfilling to me.
Yeah.
Like those don't sound very good. Like, I mean, not for
me. No, I'm
for
with
me,
you. I get it. No, I get it. I don't know. Every generation learns from the previous and then goes out and hopefully grows and does better. I hope my kids do better than I did. That's the goal for me, is that they grow past where I was when I was their age or even older. I mean, I hope I always carry more wisdom than them. If my kids start to know more than me, then I need to read a book. I don't know. But you said something a little bit ago, and I have to remember what I was going to say. It was talking about the business.
I kind of knew this is how this conversation was going to go. We could never just talk about just this. But that's just how it is. I mean, everything in your emotional life and your practical life involves your impacts your business and your day-to-day operation.
I remember. Sorry. It hit me right when you were talking. The self-discovery journey after. So not just in business, but in personal life. This marriage is now dissolved. How was that for you in terms of self-reflection?
I spent a lot of time at my house by myself.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was really to the point of like being introspective as a kid. I spent a lot of time just thinking, like just, how do I better myself out of this situation? I don't know. It's hard to put all of that time spent just in my head thinking and
I'm going for more.
I just spent a lot of time with myself. I had, my buddy Jay, who I mentioned earlier, my business mentor. He's just a good person, and he always had some great recommendation on a book or a thought or a quote or something he could throw at me, and I would just show up at his house and have dinner with them. You know what I mean? Just he was that friend who was just like, yeah, just show. He's my age. Our birthdays are only a couple weeks apart, so he's one of the few people who's like, man, I love when you just show up. Like that. Remember that? Like the people like us, like 50 years ago, when somebody just shows up, you're like, man, that was cool and spontaneous. And now it's like everybody's on a tactical mission to the window to find out who just pulled up in the driveway.
Yeah, you better text me first. I'm actually trying to get out of that, though, not to sidestep your story, but with the kids hitting the ages they are, I always want to feed more kids. So I always want to tell them, if you've got friends, bring them on over. I'll be ready.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get back to that anyway. But I was going to ask, did you have somebody that was talking to you or guiding you or offering you insight? Or was it truly all just you?
Yeah, and I read the book of Job quite a bit. You read that book in the Bible? It's just about his, this guy is pulled to his wit's end, about the stuff that he's dealt with. And it's really just fighting the good fight, knowing that if you have the discipline to see yourself, it's a lot of visualization too. It's seeing yourself out of it. It's like accepting I don't know, man. People love their filters. They love to just put filters over everything and kind of pretend things aren't what they are. And the first thing about any amount of struggle or adversity is the acknowledgement part. It's you have to look around and be like, this sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So once you do that, then it's different, because acknowledging it is not accepting it. Acknowledging it is just noticing that it's there, like seeing it for what it is. Then you have to accept it. That's the next step. And so you accept it, and then the only thing left to do after that is just the action part.
Which can take a long time.
Yeah. But thank goodness the visualization part is in an instant. That's the beauty of a thought becoming reality, is that intangible measurable electric pulse in your brain that comes from nothing that turns into something physical. And spend a lot of time reading and listening to Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And it's not even just a money thing. It's literally a life principle on how to visualize your way into the existence that you want.
Yeah, I did read that
I know
book.
you talk a lot about manifestation.
I do, yeah.
But it's underrated in its sense of, that book actually goes back and gives examples of people. Perfect example, right? You got some basketball players. There was a group of basketball players that were given 3 different assignments to improve their free throws. The first group actually practiced free throws. The second group was told not to even think about basketball at all. Don't do anything. The third group was not to physically practice, but to mentally practice. Visualize yourself making free throws. The visualization and the practical were nearly identical in their ability to improve. So the fact that you can visualize something into existence is just the most powerful. It's the power,
Yeah.
It's the power in getting through struggle and adversity and getting the lesson out of it. So if you lack an ability to visualize, you can look forward to not changing very much.
I will tell you that I am actually really glad that you said that, because we think about manifesting and visualizing goals and things that we want to achieve, and it always is usually financial, but we never think about it in the struggle.
Yeah.
We never think about visualizing ourselves out of a struggle.
People do it when everything's nice. It's like, oh, it's a nice day. I got an hour. I'll just meditate and do a little visualization. And it comes at a good time. It's convenient, you know.
Yeah.
I don't have to be anywhere for 20 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, when you're at the bottom of the barrel with just your two nostrils sticking up out of the crap that you're in the bottom, and you can actually, like, learn to use that point as that's when you need it the most.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be able to push everything away from you enough to just put some positive thought in there. My stepdad, who I mentioned earlier, has been going through a lot of like physical ailments lately. You know, he had some edema, like swelling of his legs. He's just had all of this stuff he worked hard and he played hard, you know, and he was a heavy equipment welder, so like very physical job. So he's just, you know, his hip needs to be replaced. You know, he's just going through it. He kind of was at a point where he had just kind of felt like he was ready to give up. You know, his list of medications was getting bigger. He went to the hospital and died for 4 minutes until they resuscitated him because he got a blood transfusion and things didn't go right. You know, you signed a disclaimer saying this may not go well, you know. And so when he came out of that, I mean, he was at just the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, maintaining my relationship with him over the years, despite the rocky beginning and what I felt was his inability to parent, turned into this, you know, this continual relationship where now, even in his older years, I'm still learning a lot from him. And now I feel like I have something I can give him. And so he's at the bottom of the barrel. He's got all these ailments. And I sat down with him at the table a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I know everything's not really going for you right now, but he had mentioned, like, I told him I was going on a hike, and he's like, yeah, I'd like to get out there and hike. I was like, well, I'll tell you what, man, like, I was like, you're going to get your hip replacement soon. I was like, I want you from now until you get through with your rehab every day, take a few minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, and visualize yourself. Just close your eyes and pretend you're walking on the paved trail next to the river. Just get yourself a mile down the trail, like mentally. And this was I wasn't even revisiting like Think and Grow Rich at this point. This wasn't Napoleon Hill type stuff. It was from a long time ago, but just visualization became really important for me. And I just wanted to give him something, because if he's sitting there and his body's all broken and he's on all these medications and he needs help with this, you can still visualize, you know, if you're in a mental state that's capable of, you know, you're not on too many heavy drugs, right? And I saw him the next week, and he was like, he didn't use his walker. He was going back and forth to the front door, like, and he's like, oh yeah, Junior, I did. He calls me Junior, and I'm a stepkid. It's the funniest thing ever. He's always called me Junior. Yeah, I did what you were talking about. I've been thinking about walking. And I'm like, well, shit, you're doing it. You know what I mean? You're already like up doing it. Like, did you not realize that? Like, I mean, it's only, 5 yards, but that getting to the front door and back to your chair, 20 times a day, that's going to turn into a mile, and it's been interesting to see him like be in the throes of it, and all of a sudden just put a small amount of visualization into his life and watch how it's kind of going to help him. It's bringing him back up mentally. I can tell he was in a much better spot in his head.
I'm glad he was receptive to that.
Yeah, I know. Just being somebody who's just very simple. He had like a middle school education, you know what I mean? Like, right. Which doesn't have to do with, as we've learned, that doesn't dictate later in life. But he's just a man of few words, and he's just not, he's not a deep thinker. If he is, he can't explain it, So,
and it's probably just who he is in his design.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's more for me when you tell me that. It feels like there's I do not like generalizations at all. Mm-hmm. But that generation is less open to hearing, usually, what they could do differently. Like, you're not going to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so it's great that he was receptive to that.
It's the abrupt, brash delivery that kind of leading up until this generation is kind of given. It's everything's just cut short. We're not talking about it. I'm not going through these 10 steps of reprimanding you before I whip your butt. It's
right.
It's just, and so we've been able to. We, meaning this generation, has been able to kind of extend out that end, where you don't want to be, because that's what you saw growing up. And all this stuff in between is really giving us perspective on what can be done.
Yeah. What's this book you brought?
This is by Ryan Holiday. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's just a little book. I just completed my 100th day of doing a minimum of 60 minutes worth of physical exercise every day. So
That's
I'm on this
great.
discipline journey. And visualization plays into at least getting you started into that. But now I'm kind of on, I'm really comparing and contrasting the difference between motivation and discipline. Mm-hmm. Motivation is fleeting. Mm-hmm. It comes and goes, and it's like, it's the most unpredictable thing, because I can sit here today and be like, oh, tomorrow's going to be great. I'm going to go, and I got this like trail in mind. I'm going to, 7 miles. I'm going to do this thing. And tomorrow comes and the weather's not quite what I thought it was going to be. So, maybe I'm a little more tired in the morning, or, what. There's too many factors that play into someone's motivation, and there's a lot of ways to get derailed. Discipline is different. Discipline is almost binary. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of discovered that over the last, 100 days or whatever it's been. That, because, with all this rain we just had from the hurricane that rolled by, I had every reason. It rained all day for 3 days or 4 days. I had every reason not to go out and walk, but I went out, and I learned that in the first 5 minutes when you're walking in the rain, you kind of worry about because I don't have all the gear. I never get all the right stuff. I don't have the right weights. I don't have the pants for hiking. I don't have, you know what I mean? I've never been a catalog buyer, right? So I just kind of, I didn't grow up getting all of that stuff. So now I just look around and see what I think is going to work the best, and I just put my shoes on. But these shoes have 400 holes in them because they're meant to breathe. So a block down the street, my feet are completely soaked, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that while something's happening, it's all you can focus on. But once you're past the point of it happening, you don't even think about it anymore. So the first block, I'm like, I can feel my toes getting soaked in the end of my foot. And then I'm like, I think my entire sole of my shoe is soaked now. And then, another 100 yards goes by, and I can hear I can feel the water squishing between my toes, as I'm walking or running or whatever. But then after that, I don't think about it anymore. 3 or 4 miles down the road, I forgot that almost all of it, my feet have been soaking wet the entire time, right? So all that to say that discipline overrides that stuff, because in my mind, the binary aspect of it is that, no, discipline is doing it. So you just go do it.
Yeah.
There's no room for an excuse, because being that it's binary, there's no, well, maybe, or if this, you give yourself all these contingencies. No, the goal is to work out an hour every day, and it doesn't matter if there's a foot of snow on the ground or whatever. I don't have a home gym. I do have a garage. I can go get on an elliptical or something out there, but it's old. It's like spider webs everywhere, and I go out there if it's just, I don't feel like walking that day. I want something I want to sweat like crazy and get, put some metal in my ears and get out there. I was like, by the way, Christy, don't ever come look through the window, because I'm afraid of what you might see in there, while I'm listening to metal and running,
and
it's
time.
It's I'm getting out the demons. All right, just let me go out here.
You don't go to the gym, probably. do it in your own space.
Yeah,
I get that though, because last year in December I started my own little discipline, and I definitely wasn't motivated every day. I was getting up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was getting up at 4:30. Because I had to leave by 5 to get to do the class I wanted to do. I was doing a spin class and then a body pump class. And it was freezing cold outside. Mm-hmm. I very much could have stayed warm and cozy in my bed, but I knew that I needed to do it because I could see my health in the picture it was, and I know what I wanted it to look like. I did not want to be winded walking up my stairs or doing something with my kids. So I did have that visual of what I wanted. But then I'll be honest with you, once I achieved it, I stopped going, which tends to happen for me.
Does that graph ever say anything about being optimistic? Or is optimism part of that graph?
Oh, I'm sure,
I've always been kind of, one, very blessed, but again, I have almost stubborn optimism, if that's even I'm stubbornly optimistic to the point where it's this is somewhere where I should not be optimistic, but I am. And I think that's where, like, I'm reading this book, like, the obstacle is the way. I was out walking and a lady stopped me. It's my friend's mom. She was like, I see you out here all the time. And it just made me think of this book. And, like, I guess she sees maybe some stuff I post online. She's like, I was just thought about you. I got this book and I looked at the title and it made me think of you. And I was like, well, what is it? She's like, the obstacle is the way. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Like, because I was just on this, like, the amount of adversity is directly correlated to the amount of the lesson you get out of it.
Yeah.
And that's the timeless
So she
art of
told
turning
you to get
trials
this
into
book.
triumph. Yeah. So he's got a few books.
I haven't heard of this guy.
Yeah.
Ego is the enemy. Now, I will say this, and I was going to tell you this when you were talking about Think and Grow Rich. Not that I know more than these people. I'm not saying that at all. But I feel like my thoughts around manifestation have changed.
Okay.
And even around the ego. I don't believe the ego is the enemy anymore. I think we all need to have a healthy ego. I think if he added unhealed ego.
Yeah. Blown out of proportion ego.
Yeah. We need healthy ego. We need a doctor to walk into a room before a surgery and have a healthy ego and say, yes, I know how to operate on your heart.
It translates to confidence in a lot of ways. It's healthy.
Yeah. Well, and looking at the chart, people who do not have a defined heart, not that they struggle with confidence, but it is tied to self-worth. You have an undefined heart. So have you struggled with self-worth in your life?
Not to my knowledge. And maybe that might tie into what I was asking about the optimism part of it. Like,
yeah.
But I don't know if you're...
So it's not just self-worth, though. It's your ego. It's your willpower. So it's just because I love that you said no, though, because people will think that that's just their destiny to be a certain way, and it's really not. So if you haven't struggled with that, that's a not self thing to struggle with. So if you haven't, then you're operating in alignment with yourself. You're probably listening to your intuition, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, intuition doesn't... I was just thinking that intuition is, again, language is the heart's lament. Like, I can... Like you said, I feel comfortable with my intuition. I've always felt that it's led me pretty well. But I can't always put it into words. Like these guys, like you're saying, like you were saying that you don't know more than them. These guys have a way of putting stuff into words that I'm just like, it's all, if I could record thoughts and feelings, I'd have a library.
Well, and that's what you have to do. You have to speak it out because you have the defined throat and the storyteller connected to that. So if you speak it out and then send it to an editor, they will put it in a book for you.
I feel like I don't have the skeleton key to like storytelling quite yet. I'm still learning a lot, and I watch a lot of stand-up comedy, and I'm always dissecting it to see how people tie things in and when they tie them in, and yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the most impressive wraparound.
I was about to say that. And when it wraps around, you're like, oh man, that was good.
Yeah, it's like, how did you know I just forgot about that, and then you just bring it right back. That's the real art, in the craft. So my granddad and my dad are like drawing. Like my granddad was a political cartoonist for decades, and my dad has always been a drawer as well. He can sketch and draw anybody really, but I didn't really kind of get that. I can kind of draw, I can whatever, but I feel like what I got from them artistically didn't come out on a pen and paper. It was It was more so in imagination. So.
And painting the pictures.
Yeah.
A lot of people do struggle with visualization, so it's pretty cool that you can do that, though. I do it for my kids all the time. I used to do it for the boys when they would be falling asleep, and now I'm doing it with Scarlett a lot, but especially my oldest, if he was having a hard time falling asleep, I'll be like, what do you want to do when you get older? He was like, something like want to be recruited for the NBA. And I'm like, okay, well, let's sit at the ceremony when you're going to be recruited. What's the tablecloth look like? Who's there? Who's sitting next to you? What did you just eat for dinner? Who's up on the stage? And we would paint the entire picture. But what I was going to tell you about the way things have changed for me with manifesting, and this was something we talked about when we did the show together the first time, because you were talking about wanting to go to where your coffee beans were being sourced and to sit on that truck, and you have had that visualization of sitting on the back of the truck for so long. Do you remember telling me that story?
Yeah. Well, I don't forget the story because that's like the story for me.
Yeah, and then you accomplished it. You did that after the show.
I'm so glad you brought that back up. That's good.
Yeah, I loved that story because it tied into so much of law of attraction. But my perspective on that has changed because I also believe that we think we want things, but it's because we think we know what we want. But when we actually lean in and operate in alignment with ourselves, it can look totally different. And I feel like that was true for you because it was the core. Let me tell you what it is for me. And this is the first time I've ever spoke this out. I have had a vision of me standing on a stage talking to a sea of people. And it's not that I want that and I'm trying to create that. It's literally what comes into my frame of mind when I'm meditating all the time for years. I thought for sure that meant that when I was with my last company, I would be on the stage for that.
I think you did somewhat. I saw a few times.
I did a little bit.
You did present and talk a little bit.
Yeah, to about 100 people, but I'm talking like an auditorium, like a big auditorium.
Well, once it gets past like a couple thousand, it probably doesn't matter.
I don't know. I guess I'll let you know.
Yeah.
If I get more nervous or less. But what's interesting is I thought that that's where my vision was going to lead me, but I'm not there anymore. I'm not with that company anymore, really.
I just completely quit selling barbecue sauce this year after 12 years. So it's okay to
well, I still love the
half
products
out while you're doing other stuff.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's it was still a good place for me when I was there, but now it's time to shift and go somewhere else. But I still have that vision. And so now I'm like, okay, I thought I knew what it was going to be, but apparently I don't. And this is where that surrender comes in. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and operate in alignment with myself. What do I want to be doing? I want to be doing this. I want to be having conversations. I do love speaking. I think I'm not ready to speak to a sea of people, though. I'm not there yet. And I'm totally fine saying that because I believe it'll happen one day. I just don't even know in what capacity. I really don't. And that's where I've kind of shifted that law of attraction, manifestation type stuff. Like I see that is in my future, but I don't know if it's in 5 years, 10 years. And I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about or what I'm going to do. I just believe it's going to happen. So I was trying to
it may be, the sea of people may not be direct either. I mean, you can obviously reach in a huge number of people doing something like this, given enough time and the value of the content to the audience.
That's true. Right? That's true. But I actually think it is going to be
physical.
Yeah, I've seen it. Even when I was a little girl, I would see that for the longest time. So, and I don't know what it means, but here it is. Well, it'll be really fun to jump back to this episode when it finally does happen and say, oh, we see it now.
You know what's interesting? I've always I'm always trying to, chisel down, like really whittle down away at like who I am in my journey with, I'm always like fluctuating 20 pounds or something, right? So I'm constantly, and I'm not big into like fad. I don't do fad diet stuff, more like real metrics, like, discipline, things like that. And so even as much as I feel like I've fluctuated and gone up, and like this chart says I'm morbidly obese, but I'm not, like, I don't have really that kind of frame, it's, there's a lot of factors. Like I've never seen myself as an unhealthy, overweight, like person. I've almost had the reverse of like body dysmorphia or whatever people, like when, I guess when people
like you're
are
more
skinny,
healthy than you are.
Yes. It's like, you want to talk about being optimistic. So,
I feel like I could say the same though. I could say the same.
Like I always see myself as, and I think it's really just visualization. It's like, that's where I would like to be, and I don't lose sight of where I'd like to be despite, having lost 35 pounds at one time, then putting 25 back on. And then, and this is over the course of 20 years now. But I mean, I never lose sight of that healthy version of me.
It never becomes impossible.
No, the whole, like, I'm just going to accept where I'm at, and because then that becomes your new, if I can just stay this, And
which I see it that way too for me. That's what I was saying, like I'm the same as nothing it's never impossible for me, but I actually probably do have some body dysmorphia. Just, I think being a female and growing up in the generation that I did, I'm going to look in the mirror and think I'm about 30 pounds heavier than I actually am every single time.
The body dysmorphia is the phone's fault. I mean, all you have to do is change the angle and you look like a different person. I don't know.
This is true.
Yeah.
Or walk in front of a different mirror. Don't look in the Target mirrors. If you're struggling, do not go in the Target fitting room and look in the mirror. You're going to be like, wow, this is bad.
How do you approach, like when you get to the end of the line and you really have to make a hard fork into like, is this really it? Or is this me forcing it?
Yeah.
You know? Like that wisdom to know the difference thing. Like the tail end of that serenity, courage, and wisdom. Like, that's serenity to change what you can, you know.
Yeah, that's a good question, man.
Courage to change, or, you know, whatever it is. Serenity to accept what you can't.
Yeah, what is it? It's the wisdom to know, I don't know.
I got you.
It's the serenity prayer. I do know what you're talking about.
Serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. Wisdom to know the difference.
That's so good to point that out, though.
Yeah, I mean
that's where I was last year.
I find myself at that intersection all the time because your optimism, being that I operate in that area a lot, like just very, very optimistic about the way things can be, you know, with enough visualization and energy and effort put towards it. You get to a point where you're like, is this like, is all my effort leading into this, or is there some amount of delusion that's keeping me in this lane versus seeing it for what it really is? And that's like that wisdom to know the difference. Like that saying without that on the end is, you know, that really completes the whole thing.
So how do you know then? How has it become clear for you? I can tell you
just
my answer.
Repetition.
Yeah.
I think really just years of trying to be as real with yourself as possible about where you are.
Right.
You know?
I think mine is totally surrender. I mean, I can tell you because I actually talked about this on my surrender episode, which only just came out this morning. But
which I listened to already.
You did? Yeah. Look at
nice.
You. When we were getting to that point to have to make the decision to get rid of the vehicle that I had earned, that is exactly where I was. Is do I stay here? Do I continue to push when it feels like, you know, the feeling though? I think that's really what it comes down to, is the feeling. Because when you're trying to force something and it feels like you're really pushing a brick wall and it ain't moving, that's usually the indicator that you need to step back and stop for a second. And it's in that pause that you can see, okay, I had to let go completely. Richie had to let go completely. And it was the moment that happened, everything just kind of presented itself. And we could see, oh, there's another path here. I'm trying to walk on this one because I think it's right. But the second you just stop trying, take a break, allow yourself a break, and you'll see.
Yeah, you got to breathe. I like that you guys went and got something to eat and took a minute. Because that minute, I think I've talked about this probably 100 times this year to someone, or some ones, many people, about before you go to respond to something that cuts you a little bit, you know, a remark that I was like, taking that moment to just like take one breath will save you. You know, that's some biblical principle too. Yeah, that's mentioned in the Bible so much in Proverbs about being able to hold your tongue.
Yeah.
And I'm not good with like reciting stuff and knowing exactly where things are, but I do look to it as a source of insight and wisdom. And many, many, many times just having the ability to remain silent has allowed you not to reveal yourself for being an ass.
Well, and that was a lesson that took me years to learn. It took me that, you want to talk about the bigger the struggle, the bigger the lesson. It's taken my whole life to get to there. So I know it pretty well now. Like, the lesson was pretty big. I mean, that was for me, and just talking about marriage, I very much will fire it off. And I had to learn to shut up. I had to learn to step back. And not just with him, with everyone, I always wanted to interject, be that hero. But also I'm a projector, so projectors want to guide that unsolicited advice. I had to really learn to sit back, shut up, and wait for the time to be right. And I only just learned that in probably the last 2 years, honestly.
Well, let me tell you what that looks like on the other side in divorce. Right?
Okay.
That looks like, do I continue to try and resolve issues it's so tough to put into words, but essentially, do you keep trying to resolve or do you move on because, are you being delusional? Are you thinking that you're going to fix something that is unfixable,
Yeah.
Do you do what the bond of marriage tells you to do and to not give up and to always fight to keep that relationship intact?
Yeah.
Or do you recognize the truth of it?
Well, and that's it right there, right?
And the truth is so skewed because you're emotional and you get to that hard fork. You're like, okay, well, I got married, and in that pact, I said that I would do everything I could to keep the relationship together.
Yeah.
But how far is too far?
Right. And so I want to ask you, and I also want to share. I mean, we've been together for almost 20 years. Mm. It would be a lie to tell you that I haven't had to sit with myself and ask myself that question and listen to my intuition. And every time I know that we are not done and it's time to keep going. Mm. But I feel like so often that doesn't happen, and then people do stay in marriages that are not healthy or helpful, and it's really just bringing you both down. If you can't grow past a situation and evolve, and we don't always every time, like there's definitely a pattern, and I really had a huge awakening with one recently. I cannot wait to tell him about, because he doesn't even know. But I told him last night, like, hey, I had a huge realization for us, and I can't wait to tell you about it. Because I know that once you have that awareness, like you said, you get your awareness, and then you acknowledge it. You get to decide whether you're going to take action or not. And that's something that's come up for us.
But to tie that into, like, the wisdom to know the difference.
But to know the difference. And to know when it's time to walk away. Is probably, and I say this all the time because I'll post stuff about Richie and I think last year on our anniversary I posted something, and it was very much know that it's okay if it's time to walk away. You got to ask each other and yourself, are we still on this path together, or is it time for us to veer off? And it's okay. I think there's too much pressure. I mean, I think divorces tend to either happen too easily or not. Yeah. It's either one or the other.
An interesting thought is that if you look at somebody and you're like, do you think we should get married? And you should go, I don't know, let me grab a quarter and flip it real quick. Yeah. That's actually the percentage of people that get divorced.
Isn't that crazy?
You could predicate you could actually predict, like, just flip a coin, let's see if it's going to work. Nope. Not going to work. Let's not get married. I mean, the percentage is so high, it's the flip of a coin.
It really is. Where were you, though, when you realized, do you mind if I ask you that question? Where were you when you realized that, okay, it's time to walk away and walk a different path. Our path is going to look a little different now. How hard was it to get to that space?
The hardest, I guess. Never been through it before.
Yeah.
But it really applies to all relationships. It's not even just it's easy to sit and talk about divorce because the weight that the word carries, and like the energy behind it, and it's a lot wrapped up in that. But really, I've been talking to my wife about relationships with people. I'm at an age where I can see the people I used to spend a lot of time with, whether it was in high school playing sports or people that I after high school rode bikes with, BMX, skateboarding, that whole thing,
Yeah.
Businesses, like other business partners that I've had before, like some of those people don't really care to carry on friendships, or you know what I mean? So
I
it's
totally
things like
know
that.
what you mean.
So it's not even just, it's just relationships in general.
You're right.
I mean, you know,
100%.
And I've been at that point of the wisdom to know the difference between carrying and dragging a relationship, friends, you know what I mean, like forward unnecessarily.
Well, ending friendships actually, maybe it's not as hard as divorce. I would say that that's probably hard to now have to divide your life that you've built around each other. But to end a friendship with someone you've been friends with maybe your whole life, but you've known that this person isn't good for you, and having to walk away from that, that's really hard too. A lot of people are too, well, I don't want the repercussions of what'll come if I do that. So they don't, and they stay friends with people and keep these people in their life that are not good for them.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and 20 years later, you're speaking different languages and you have different values and goals, and you know, you just are different people completely.
Yeah.
A friend of mine that's in business went in business with his brother, and 50-50, you know, the hardest type of business, right? Nobody's got any leverage to be able to say, okay, I'm the one that calls the shots for this.
Yeah.
Having that person who owns the majority of a business is I highly recommend it. Like watching people in a 50-50 split is like you perpetually are at a state of being at an impasse.
I laugh because I've really had this conversation with clients.
Oh, it is the worst.
Very
It shouldn't
much.
be possible.
Yeah.
Like there ought to be, okay, who's 51, who's 49, because someone
Flip the
has
coin.
to make the
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
You know, you have it, you end up at a stalemate, you end up, you know, in a like you're circling the runway indefinitely, you know? And so they started off with very aligned principles. You know, they're brothers, they know more about each other, they understand how they operate, and they start off, and this again could be any relationship, but in this example they start off really close, but the lines are close together. Imagine everybody on a path, right? And so there's a point when the lines are close together, but if they're not perfectly parallel, they will eventually exponentially get further apart the further you travel, right?
This is true.
And so he's 10 years into business, and he is dealing with a lot of, like, talking to his brother about anything business related is like talking to a stranger who has no business experience, because the values and the goals and the principles that he operates on in managing that business are so far from his brother's expertise and what his brother has put in over time as far as equity, and you know, he hasn't made a real effort to learn about business and its inner workings. You know, he has a role,
Right.
but in the brother's example, he created a job for himself. He basically bought a W-2. You know, he bought himself a job.
Right.
This person bought themselves a business admin role, right? He bought himself into the role of CEO, and he takes it very seriously. You know, his number one thing is to look out for his employees, and then to obviously like take care of the cash flow for the business to make sure everything is able to keep running. But as they started, and they're close, they were not on a parallel path. So now 10 years down the road, they're so far apart because exponentially that distance gets further and further and further that they just don't speak the same language. And so I think when people come in to your life, you know, those paths intersect.
Yeah.
And sometimes if they're perpendicular, they intersect only momentarily, and someone comes into your life just for a blip, and they're there and you learn from it. Hopefully you get something out of that relationship, and you know, it wasn't all for nothing, right?
Right.
And then some people are kind of like, it's not perpendicular, it's almost like they're directly aligned. So they come into contact with each other, they get really close, you know, they interact a lot, but it may take 20, 30 years for that distance to spread between them. So, you know, some relationships are easy to end. They go quick. There's just no, you know, there's nothing there that's going to keep it. And then others seem like they're really doing well, but they just continually to get further and further apart. And so those are the ones that get hard to know. Should I, you know, those are the ones where you're on the fence about, should I can help? Do I need to keep coddling this relationship? You know, I'm always the one that calls. Like, why am I always the one that calls? You know, why am I the outreach person? You know,
Yeah.
why do I always make the drive? That kind of, you know.
I feel like that was a really good, like, visual. You are a visionary. That was great.
I feel like that is really going to click for people when they hear that. Because, yeah, you're right. If you allow time to come in to those parallel lines that are not exactly aligned and they're spreading, yeah. That was awesome. I'm going to ask you if you have anything else in your wisdom center to share to close us out with.
Probably, something I've spent a little bit of time listening to and really contemplating lately has been about balance, and kind of to the example I said about, draw a circle on a piece of paper and write struggle or adversity on that side, and then flip it over and write lesson. And it's like they're the same. The amount is going to be the same that you extract out of it. The larger the struggle, the bigger the lesson, right? Well, then also combined with that was the innate balance to life. Like something came to mind about how balanced everything is naturally, right? So I was listening and a guy said something about realizing that the amount of inhales is exact to the amount of exhales that you have in life. And he was essentially talking about how some things come into your life and you love them so much you want to pull them closer to you. The more you like something, the closer you want to be to it, right? But it's not meant to come all the way to you. And the more you pull, the more it pulls away from you. And that balancing effect is something to really consider. Like when things come in and out of your life, the closeness at which they are, the more you mess with that, the more you feel like you need to get involved and pull something you love closer to you, the more that opposite balancing effect is going to pull it away from you. So just to enjoy it as it presented itself in your life at the distance it did. Sometimes it's really close, some things are a little further, but like the gratitude and appreciation for it being in your life at all is what's important.
Because honestly, it's going to flow closer to you if it's meant to.
Yeah. And conversely, the things that come at you that you don't want, that you try and shove away from you, the harder they push against you.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That is so true. That's great.
Just balance. Like I've really been thinking a lot about balance.
That's great advice. Well, great wisdom. That was great wisdom. I love that you gave us that bit. I'm going to say thank you so much for coming and hanging with me. This was great. We talked for a very long time.
I had a lot of fun. There's a lot to talk about.
I mean, it's hard to not when you have so much. And you really do. You have so much wisdom. So
I think like everything's in abundance. You just have to realize it. Like I was walking in the rain the other day, and I was like just trying to get my head around the idea of focusing on the abundant, the positives, I love the example of like the best way to hit a tree when you're skiing through the woods is to look at the trees.
That is
right?
That is great.
So you have to look at the path between everything, right? So, and that's much to that visualization thing. If you visualize the negative, that's what will manifest. I mean, it can be talked about and dissected, but at the end of the day, just sum it up in a few words. The things that you think will become your reality, And so I was looking around. I'm like, everything is in abundance. I can't even count the amount of clouds in the sky. I can't count the number of raindrops. I can't count the number of corn stalks in this field, the air that I'm breathing. Like, to have this abundant experience and to really just focus on the things that there are plenty of in your life, like is really, it does a lot for you.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. No, we just don't live in a world of scarcity,
We don't. I'm trying to find the right way to say this because I don't want it to come off like insulting.
I'm also saying this understanding that we live in a developed country. There's plenty of instances of momentary scarcity, like people really struggle. I'm not, putting that off the table, but
I understand, and I know why I understand you saying that too, because every time I say something, it's with the understanding that we live where we live. So I get it. But not everyone can have that visual, and it takes hearing it from someone else. So I think you just saying everything that you just said is extremely valuable, and I don't know if you even realize it, because it might shift someone else's way of thinking because they're sitting feeling like they have nothing. But actually, if you think about it,
you can really start with the most simplest of things. Clouds in the sky, the air that you breathe, your heart is still beating, the simplest of things, and then eventually you'll go up to the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And that's how you pull it in more and more and more. So that was a beautiful thought to end on. Thank you so much, Brandon. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Glad to be here. Glad to do it again soon.
Yes, you can come back anytime.
All right, my friends, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, subscribe on your favorite listening app. Until next time, bye now.
Go ahead.
No,
with your commentary.
Well, the word granny came to mind first, but I didn't want to chop it.
I don't even know where this thing came from. Okay, so my my hot water heater thing, whatever it's called. What are those things called?
Kettle.
Yeah.
Electric kettle.
Yeah.
That's a kettle too.
Yeah, it just petered out on us. It said, we're not making you hot water anymore. Okay. And then Richie always gets after me because I don't keep the heat in. Because I don't put...
Yeah.
He's like,
and you don't even really need to, when you press that, you don't even need to push it all the way to the bottom. It's like, you just kind of want to push the grinds down enough so give this a little swirl. And let that water get around there. And then, like a lot of people with the French press, they push and push and push, and they're like, shove. I'm like, are you trying to shove the post through the bottom of the glass? Like,
I mean,
you don't need.
I need every drop of liquid.
You just need to push it down enough to get the grinds below where the pouring spout is.
Oh, you don't have to take it to the bottom. The water will still come out.
Well, so under that amount of pressure, you're forcing all the little fine particles up through that metal mesh.
That's why it gets in my coffee cup.
Yeah, some people like it, some people don't.
I don't like that. That's gross.
I love it.
You do? You like coffee grinds in your...
Not grinds. So there's a difference between like the silt and the granule stuff, like the little dusting of the silt on the bottom is good for what they call mouthfeel. It's like, a little heavier.
It's good for cholesterol too, I heard.
Good for boosting my cholesterol.
I got a good cream. Hold on.
Okay.
And then I'll be ready.
Just gonna paint the picture here. She's got a nice little custom sign, Courageous Conversations, special guest with my name in plastic lettering. It almost looks like a menu board, so I guess you change it out as the person comes through. So there's no price next to it though, so I'm a little disappointed. It's got a picture of Richie and her, Las Vegas. It's cute in here. Looks good. A good friend of mine in high school, Cindy, her mom is just fantastic, and so I knew she could take a joke, and I went into the kitchen and I took one drawer out where the silverware was and switched it with the drawer next to it. And then we just sat down and we're hanging out, and I was waiting for her to come in there, and I kid you not, she pulled the drawer open and stared into it for about 30 seconds. Just that one little, like she thought she had been dropped on another planet. She'd lived in that house for so long and had everything the way it was that she just was like, why is the silverware missing? And what's all this crap?
That's actually really funny.
Yeah, it's still one of my favorite. It was my early experimentation in moving somebody's cheese.